Sheila Watt Cloutier, we are very happy that you're here with us today at the think tank of Le Monde, and we love green. You came all the way from Coudjouac, that is in northern Canada, in Quebec, in far northern Quebec. You dedicated your work and your life to your community, the Inuit, first involved in health and education issues, then in environmental issues. You won many prizes for your action. You were nominated for the Nobel Prize in 2007. You won the Norwegian Sophie Prize and the UN Champion of the Earth Prize and the Right Livelihoods Award in 2015. You recently published a book which is called in French Le Droit au Froid, which was just translated in French. And you pledge that protection against global warming should be recognized as a human right. First, I would like you to please describe for us the place where you come from, Coudjouac. Where is it? And what does it look like? And how does it feel?
Yes, I come from northern Quebec, a little community called Coudjouac. That's where I was born. I traveled only by dog team the first 10 years of my life. I didn't know any English until I was 6 when I started school. We lived very traditionally when I was growing up. It's a very small town compared to here, of course. When I was born, it was just a few hundred people. Most people were still living out in the outpost camps. And now we're up to almost 2,000 people. And we are still a hunting, fishing, gathering people in our community. And we're very impacted by the changes that are happening with our climate.
Can you describe for us what are the impacts? Because the impacts of climate change are much stronger in the Arctic than here, although we can sort of feel them here already.
Yes.
Can you describe the impacts for us?
Yes. Well, you have to remember that the Inuit culture is based on the ice, the snow, and the cold, right? And for us, it's mobility and transportation. The ice is our highways. The snow is our highways. And that's where we go to harvest our organic food and a very nutritious food that we harvest. And so the changes are very, very stark up there because for us, when the ice starts to go, when it's too thin and it's not forming in the same way that it used to, it becomes dangerous. So it becomes an issue of safety and security, first and foremost, because our culture is based on that cold. So the changes are really about safety and about how we are able to travel those icy highways safely like we used to. It's not the same anymore. Everything is unpredictable. The weather is unpredictable. And so it creates a lot of stress on a community.
160,000 people live in the Arctic, right? 160,000 Inuits live there. So there are impacts on there. Also on the environment, the animals you see around you. Mm-hmm. Can you describe that too?
Yes. Well, everything that depends on that cold, because we not only depend on that cold, but we thrive in that cold. That means the hunting culture thrives in that cold. The animals thrive in that cold. And so the changes are impacting on the health of people up there in the Arctic. And for us, it's really about that. It isn't just about the wildlife, it isn't just about the ice, but it's about the communities and the people and the families that are still trying to make it in this new world order that has happened so very quickly to us. And on top of that, the environmental impacts that it's having on our food chain and a way of life that to us is very precious.
Your main message is that the protection against global warming is a human right. Mm-hmm. Can you explain why?
Yes, indeed. As I say, the world has come to understand the issues or interpret the issues of climate change just as politics or economics or academics or science. For us, it's really the human impact. So the work that I have been doing for 15, 20 years now is to humanize the issue of climate change. It's important because it connects us all in our common humanity. And so this younger generation are the ones that are starting to get that message a lot stronger than anyone else. because you're not mired in the politics like my generation is, and that you're able to understand these connections of human connections. And so for us, our right to health, our right to exist as Indigenous people, our right to educate our children on that land, our right to safety and security, all those rights that are already existing under the UN laws are the rights that we are trying to defend for ourselves. And so we make it a human rights issue because our right to be Inuit as we know it is being minimized and destroyed as a result of climate change.
Do you think that the native populations like yours, the Inuit, heard enough today? Are they struggling to get heard by the UN or the states?
Well, the message is very slow to get to people, because I think when it does not impact on your daily life, it's very easy to disconnect to what's happening in the Arctic. But now that the Arctic is the cooling system for the planet, it is the air conditioner, if you will. It's breaking down. We can sense it everywhere we go, and so what's happening with that is that it's making creating more wildfires, more droughts, more intense hurricanes all over the world as a result of the breakdown of that air conditioner, which is the Arctic ice. So that connection is really strong. And it's only recent that more and more people are starting to get that message now in terms of, so what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. It is impacting everyone else in the world. And so people, because it's impacting their homes are on fire. Their livelihoods are on fire. Their homes are flooded in water. And so they're starting to see that connection finally. But we have a long way to go because our political system is not acting as fast as it should to address these issues with the lowering of greenhouse gas emissions. So it's still an urgent matter that requires urgent action.
You say in your book that you recall a life only your generation can recall. Can you describe a bit what kind of life that was?
The kind of life that I led as a child was, I often say, is a little bit like magic, you know? Not in the Disney kind of magic world, but in the sense that everything is connected. We understood we were connected to each other. We were connected to our environment. We were connected to our culture. And we were connected to the larger cycles of nature. And so for me, that is that grounding that I had that gives me the strength and gives me the ability to carry on with the work that I have done for the last 15, 20 years. Because it is that I try to bring to the audiences to understand just how beautiful our earth is, and that we need to fall in love because we protect what we love. And as Inuit, we are trying to protect what we love. And so it's for the world to fall back in love with the connection to nature and to the importance of our planet and how it is a giving, living entity, just like we are, and not to separate ourselves from that planet, because we are the land and the land is us. We are all interconnected.
You first worked for your communiqué and became involved working on health and education issues because people are central for you. What did you see during that time on the effect of modernization of livelihoods in the Arctic?
Yes. Well, as I said, I have come from a very traditional way of life at the very young age, traveling only by dog team the first 10 years of my life, where most societies have taken perhaps 350 years to adjust to this new world order, you know, a modern world. For us, in one lifetime, we have gone through that rapid change. And with that rapid change and the tumultuous changes, as well as the tumultuous change that is happening in our culture, as well as the colonialistic approaches that we had to endure in our lives. And so that became a big struggle for us. And as a result of our loss of sense of self-worth and our self-identity, we have gone through a lot of struggles. And our social and health problems that we face in the Arctic are very big, very big. We have the highest suicide rates in North America. And so we're dealing with a lot of issues here that are very stark. So the second wave is upon us as we're trying to figure out what has happened in our strength of our ingenuity, of our culture. Remember, we are the inventors of the chaya, which is the boat that is replicated worldwide. We are a people who can build a house of snow warm enough for your families to be in. That is ingenuity. So it's not like we're victims and know nothing about the world. We know lots about the world, and we want to be able to contribute more to the sustainability of this world by being equal partners. And so it's those issues that we have, dealing with the social and health problems in our communities. And so we're trying to tell the world that we are more than the problems that we face in the Arctic, that we can be part of the solution, and that because of our connection to nature, we can teach the world a little bit about sustainability.
Can you talk about your relationship to animals, since it is quite different from the one we have here in France?
Yes, we are very connected to our wildlife. We have a deep respect for them. And we protect as much as we can, but we are harvesters. We hunt our animals and we eat them because it is very highly nutritious. When you are hunting at -50, you need to have that nutritional value that gives you the warmth while you're out there hunting and fishing. And so the kind of respect that we give to the animals is very unlike the pro-animal rights movement that is, and I understand where that comes from because of the horrific way in which southern peoples are dealing with, the way in which they slaughter their animals and so on. I understand that aspect of it, but for us, the harvesting cultures are quite different, and that we give, and when we harvest our animals, for us, it's not confirmation of death, it's affirmation of life. It's life-giving life, and we have that kind of very close relationship with the animals that we harvest.
Can you be a little bit more specific about which animals are central to you? Maybe like the seal?
Everything. All of them. Depending where we live in Canada, most of us are all marine mammal hunters, so we live on the coast, and that's the way it has been for millennia. And so we eat walruses, we eat whales, we eat seals, we eat caribou, we eat ptarmigans and geese and fish, lots of wonderful fish in the Arctic. And so we're very closely linked to harvesting the wildlife around us, which gives us highly nutritional value, as well as the warmth that is required. And we use everything. We don't waste any of the animal that we harvest at all.
You became, little by little, a very well-known member of your community. In the years 2000, you were the president of the Inuit Circumpolar Council, which gathers and represents the interest of all Inuit, whether they live in Canada, Alaska, Greenland, or Russia. During that time, you fought against what is called in English the dirty dozen. That is pollutants, persistent organic pollutants. Can you explain what they are and the consequences of on the Inuit people?
Mm-hmm. In the 1980s, as I say, we are avid eaters of what we harvest. In the 1980s, we discovered that we were being poisoned from afar. The byproduct of pesticides, the industry pollution, all of those kinds of really toxic pollutants were making their way up to the Arctic through the weather patterns. And when they got to the Arctic, it was too cold to go anywhere else. It ended up in what we call the Arctic sink, the water, where our many fish and our marine mammals eat, and they were eating these high levels of toxins. So it ended up in the nursing milk of our mothers in higher levels than anywhere else in the world. And ended up in our food chain and in our wildlife in higher levels than anywhere else in the world. And so when I got elected that time, and the work had started long before I was there, but nonetheless the global negotiation started at the UN level to try to eliminate these toxins at their source. And so we worked with many countries, to negotiate a treaty called the Stockholm Convention that would eliminate and destroy these at their source to make our food chain safer. But you know, there's still a lot of toxins in the air that are still making their way up into the Arctic, into our animals, and that we have to be very vigilant about how, what kind of a world have we created, really, when Inuit women of the Arctic have to think twice about nursing their babies as a result of toxins, because African women have to protect their babies from malaria by using DDT, for example. So, you know, it's the mothers of the world that would carry the brunt of these toxins. So for us, it wasn't just a chemical story. It wasn't just a chemical issue. It was an issue of health, first and foremost, of women of the world in particular, and the babies and children of the world in particular. And so we had to fight very hard for the world to understand these pieces on a very human scale.
This was a pollution that you were a victim of, but you didn't have any benefit from these products.
Not at all. We benefited the least from these kinds of industries of the world, but yet we carried the most toxins at the end of the day. And so that's why for us it was deeply unfair that Inuit of the world had to carry that kind of burden because of the way that we do business in the world.
So for many years now you have been in UN assemblies fighting on environmental issues. This worked because the Stockholm Convention was adopted and the dirty dozen was supposed to fade away.
Yeah.
But what are the conditions for such thing to happen? What are the lessons that you learned during this fight?
Well, what I learned was that if the world comes together to address these issues on that real human scale, you know, not some, you know, language that we can't relate to, you know, whether it's science or whether it's politics or economics, but for us as human beings to connect to these issues, it gave me the confidence that we can actually do something, that we can actually connect from that common base, from that common ground that affects us and our children and our family and the future generations. And that gave me that hope that we can do things even better when we address the issues of climate change, for example. Even though that's a daunting task, it's a huge task to try to get people on common ground, but the POPs work, the persistent organic pollutants work, and how we were able to get that kind of treaty enacted as quickly as it did under the UN gave me that sense of hope that we can do this. The world can do the right thing in addressing these issues, and particularly now with climatic changes.
Do you think that the state and the people can do the same on the global warming issue, on climate issues? Because it's even more huge.
It's huge, and it's more challenging, but it doesn't mean we can't do it. I think more and more, as I say, the evidence is so stark, it is so real, particularly in the Arctic, and we're signaling to the world, pay attention to what's happening in the Arctic, but because it's impacting everywhere else in the world. And so we need to keep learning more about that. The younger generation needs to take up the leadership as much as you can, because it's your future we're talking about. And as I say, you're the change agents that the world is waiting for, and we need to have that happen sooner than later.
So you're optimistic about the future?
I'm optimistic because whenever I am speaking to audiences, in conferences and other settings, that's most of what I do in my life now, is that I see people making those connections stronger about what's happening in the Arctic. And I also see the youth movement is getting stronger and stronger. And so I think it's with that, I do get that hope, but it's got to be added with a lot of action to it now. And so it's time to take action on these issues.
Was the fact of being a woman, did it make it more difficult or easier for you to be a leader in your community?
Well, I don't know about easy, because I don't think anything comes easy. But certainly at the same time, I think, especially with the POPs issue and with the climate change issues, I'm extremely maternal. I'm extremely maternal to begin with. I have 2 grown children and I have 2 grandsons, one very young and one 22 and one is 6. And for them and for the youth, you know, there's so many youth that we lose in our communities, that's the driving force behind what I do, is my maternal instinct to protect. And so that will continue, and it has continued. And I think the fact that I was a woman, you know, helping to negotiate those treaties that would protect the health of the pregnant women and the nursing milk of our mothers was something that did help in many ways.
The global warming is also, as though it is a danger and a security issue for the Inuit, it also opens some opportunities. Some new opportunities on the fishing, maybe in fishing areas, and also on mining, extracting resources. But you say this is dangerous. You say that the people there shouldn't go this way. Why do you say so?
Yeah, well, you know, I have my own take on that, and there's lots of people, and perhaps in our communities, that would like to go in that direction and are going in that direction, because there is no jobs, people are poor. And in fact, Inuit in the Arctic can be very hungry. And so I know and understand this situation of trying to find economic opportunities, and one of them is mining. But for me, it's caution to the wind. It's why would we get into businesses that are going to even make things worse for us, not only in the Arctic, but for the planet? The emissions that extractive industry you know, does out there in the world, and in particularly in the Arctic. And the reputation of some of these companies is not very great in other indigenous lands around the world. So why would we expect them to be different for us in the Arctic? So for me, it's caution about these things, you know. Is there such a thing as balance to extractive industry? I don't think so myself, but there are people who think that perhaps it can be done. But as I say, there are people who are working in those areas. The opportunities, the benefits to global warming, I don't know if they really outweigh the risks of climate change that's happening to a people of an entire way of life. That's my take on it.
I was thinking maybe you could comment on some pictures we see behind us, because
I forgot I had pictures up there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Yeah. Well, you know, I always bring with me the landscape, the ice-scape, and the human faces of my community, so that I can bring a little bit of the Arctic to you. And I'm hoping that you had a sense or a connection to the families that exist there. And because that's who we're about. You know, the world has come to know the Arctic more for its wildlife than its people. And so for me, it's always trying to bring the human faces and humanize the issue of climate change, which is very big. Because in my opinion, I believe that we have been messaging this issue wrong. I think we have focused way too much just on the wildlife of the Arctic. And the polar bear has become the kind of the iconic figure. But really, in reality, it's the people and the children and the families that need to be seen and heard as to what is impacting on them with the environmental issues. So these are my community that I bring to you today in this very hot day of Paris.
And can you also talk about the outfit you're wearing?
Well, you know, in my hometown, we still live very traditionally with the right kind of clothing for the winters, you know, in particular. So all of our women are still sewing their own clothing all the time, all the time, all the time. It's remarkable, the creative energy and the creative way in which we still are very attached to traditional ways. And so this is something that was made by my good friend who works on these issues and who makes all her own stuff as well. And so this is called the silabak, which is what we use, or the annoak, which is what we use oftentimes when we are speaking in public places.